Heroic Memoirs is a book written by Riccioti Garibaldi, born in Montevideo, Uruguay, son of Anita and Giuseppe Garibaldi, the Lion of Caprera, hero of the two worlds, for his participation in the Ragamuffin War, Guerra dos Farrapos, in Rio Grande do Sul, a war diary, a compilation of memories of the Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871, a war which France was defeated by the Kingdom of Prussia. The French monarchy was abolished and Napoleon III was dethroned. In this conflict, fathers and sons fought side by side, Giuseppe and his sons, Riccioti and Menotti. The latter was born in Mostardas, Lagoa dos Patos region. Ricciotti's narrative begins in the city of Dole, in the Jura mountain range, France, where there were 7,000 Italians to enlist. At that time, Italy was very close to France due to revolutionary ideals and the era of Italian Risorgimento, in which there was a desire to free it from the presence of the Austrian Empire and a process of nationalization. The narrative is full of symbolism and nostalgia. When Menotti arrived in Dole, Giuseppe and his brother Menotti were already there. 1870, Garibaldi had created the Armée du Vosges, a volunteer army from the entire Vosges region. Riccioti described Dole as a city full of rugged gorges and with a provincial road that followed railroad tracks. Among the 7,000 who came to enlist for the cause, a good part were Italians who arrived singing, playing flutes and horns, with an air of festivity. October 20, 1870, during that cold morning, Giuseppe sounded the trumpets and summoned all the recruits. On notice, with his head uncovered and fully illuminated by the rays of the rising sun, among the flags and the gleam of weapons, my father spoke to this unknown army of homeland, freedom, and glory, as Riccioti described. His speech was brief but incisive, adorned with violent gestures and illuminated magnetism that seemed to emanate from his eyes, provoking a wave of enthusiasm. Near Chantillon-sur-Cane, in the morning of the 19th day, in the middle of a dense fog, which intensity made the sun look red, like a big dilated eye held and empty. We left. They were approaching some hills. Riccioti shouted, "Stop!" He put his ear to the ground and heard a sequence of rhythmic footsteps. Everyone was already prepared for whatever was behind the hills. This was an advantage against the Prussians. They fired a volley all at once, and the Prussians returned with the same intensity. He divided his brigade in two, leaving one part stopped, responding enemy fire, and another to advance silently, crawling like reptiles. The flanking maneuver was a success, and the Garibaldian army decided the rest of the battle with bayonets. Holding back the Prussian advance at Preney-Pesque, Giuseppe organized his troops into three wide triangles and placed four artillery pieces on the slopes of the hills, which fired incessantly. A road that led from Pomblières and Sautenay to Dijon. A Prussian machine gun opened a gap for the troops, who advanced as one. This caused a disorder for a few minutes in the Vosges army. Garibaldi's brigade flanked these Prussians and the battle was won. A hailstorm interrupted the operations of both. On December 1, 1870, the Vosges army was at Autun, 15 kilometers northwest of Arnailles-le-Duc. Suddenly, an alarm was sounded. The Prussians were seen entering the city through the suburb of Saint Martin. Meanwhile, Menotti Garibaldi were in Saint-Symphorien, a small town where they repelled a Prussian detachment. In Autun, they received a report of a Captain Cheney, without any order, abandoned his post in Saint Martin, an important strategic position. They saw the movement from the heights of Talent and began flanking the city of Messigny. The Italians wore white coats, many had bandages. Their uniforms were different from each other, and they stayed in the homes of the locals. It was a time of fellowship. Veterans of Napoleonic wars told their memories and people exchanged stories by the fireplace. Riccioti tells of a very lively and funny girl named Blondinette. He met her in the home of a couple whose rooms had a Renaissance feel. Riccioti described her as blonde, slender, and that throughout the night she recited poems and told stories of Paris. Riccioti asks her, "May you say what strange motivation brought you to the city in these times of snow and battles?" She answered, "Yes, because I believe this question has been bothering you for a long time." She spoke in an ironic tone that made everyone laugh. Such was her personality. After a conversation about a possible betrayal by a commander who deserted when he saw the Prussian army entering the city through the suburb of Saint Martin, the Parisian went to her room and came back with a lead ball used as a pendant. "Since Lee doesn't talk, I'll tell you the story of this bullet," she said, between puffs of her cigarette. She mentioned a dance hall called Moulin de la Gaille in 1814 when Paris was captured by the Prussians. The National Guards were stationed in 3 mills in Montmartre neighborhood. Debray, the owner of the mills, died in a shootout. After the war, Debray's son renovated the ground floor of the residence and turned into a dance hall. Holding the necklace, we could put this like if it was a medal in a red jacket. Riccioti didn't know if she was courting him or mocking him. In a joking tone, the Parisian told Riccioti that the captain was not a traitor and showed him the ring, implying that she was married to him. Dijon, seen from the horizon, looked like a large grayish white mass. In the afternoon of January 20, 1871, the snow had lessened and the sun had risen, and there was a dense fog. Artillery pieces were in the streets and soldiers and citizens were talking, laughing, playing instruments, enjoying the outdoors after the snowstorm had passed. In the northern part of the city, families were gathered around large bonfires. In the outskirts of the city, in the middle of an intense fog, father and son met. Garibaldi informed that on the right side of the city was General Pellissier, and where the other brigades were positioned. Menotti was tasked with climbing the heights of Talent. Both brigades said goodbye. With the troops in Dijon, a defense triangle was formed. January 21, 1871. The first Battle of Dijon. Mentefel ordered a simultaneous advance to Dijon. Menotti saw the movement from the heights of Talent and began flanking the city of Messigny. Around 9 a.m., the buildings of Langres received hits from the Prussian artillery coming from sky. Menotti, with drums beating and the hiss of howitzer shells, marched to Messigny. When he could already see the village street from far, they saw a company of cavalry or guides, the term used for cavalry with bladed weapons. One of those rode out on horseback to pass on the message that the Enfant Perdu battalion, the lost children, were fighting in Messigny. This message reached Riccioti, and he sent half of his brigade to Asnières and the other to Messigny. Menotti's brigade was in a square of Messigny, and Riccioti's brigade quickly joined to help them. At the first collisions, the Prussians began to retreat to the city's cemetery and camped behind the tombs. 2 Dauphinois companies ran towards the Prussians. Dusnier hit an opponent in the head with his saber. An intense fight with bayonets and sabers. Many fell and others jumped over the wall. The cemetery was devastated. A Prussian soldier died hanging on an iron cross, and many others fell. Meanwhile, in Dijon, a young man represented the martyrdom of the Italian Holocaust for France, as Riccioti described. Giorgio Imbriani was 20 years old, and on January 21 he was martyred as a hero. The 5th Legion woke up with death, a thick voice and illuminated by the weak light of morning, seeming a manifestation from the world of ghosts. There was a young man reciting parts of Danton speeches. His accuracy sounded powerful. Riccioti compared Imbriani paraphrases to the torches of Iapetus, a titan mentioned by Homer in Iliad. The 5th Legion was awaiting for the Prussian advance, which was imminent. The young man recited Robespierre, Danton, Camille Desmoulins like a master on the eve of the battle, a hero among heroes. Riccioti lamented. Little did he know that This would be the last of his prayers. From the top of hills, figures could be seen from afar, a horizontal formation with the smoke from the first volley. Captain Tanara no longer saw Giorgio near him. Recklessly, he and a group went toward the road. Tanara watched this tragic scene from the top of a hill. Some of this group was hit, and he shouted something like, "Comrades, forward!" Barely finished the sentence and was hit. The nearby brigades took 2 steps and fired, advanced simultaneously, picked up Giorgio's body and placed on the road behind. Death illuminated a smile of a genius. Near the father and son met again to discuss what the next step would be. Right there, they were ambushed by Prussian brigades. The Arditi were the first among to spot the Prussian army, commanded by Cavalotti, Augier, and Bossi. Interesting how Riccioti used the term Arditi, a term posteriorly adopted by assault troops in the First World War. The translation would be something like bold, audacious. At that moment, when the Austrians entered the city, Cavalotti and his group were surrounded by the opponents, like a swarm of wasps. This group managed to jump from a height of 3 or 4 meters and tried to join the Allied troops, but it was as if they had been swallowed by Prussian masses. Almost at the end of the afternoon, Italian troops planted their standard in D and Dijon. When the ambulance carts came to pick the wounded, among the dead were Cavalotti. After the battle, Dijon remained silent, and a diaphanous fog hung over the entire city. This was the night of January 21, 1871. They sat around the campfire and began to tell stories. Giuseppe told stories of the Italian campaign of 1860, when he left Genoa for Sicily and defeated the Papal troops to unify and annex Sicily to Italy. He also told about the Battle of Bezzecca, a village in the middle of the hills full of conifers during the Third Italian War of Independence in 1867. It was one of the first battles that father and son faced together. The 5th Italian Regiment had been tasked with occupying Bezzecca. The other brigades lost positions in nearby villages. They all camped in Bezzecca, where many red shirts had died. Captain Chiassi led a retreat to a place between the church and the city cemetery. They were saved by the bell, by Bersaglieri and 2 artillery pieces that got him out of that mess. Our red walls were pierced by artillery, described Riccioti. There were more people from Vosges army who had witnessed this battle, like the Frenchman Roland Amos, the same who witnessed the exchange of flirtations between Blondinet and Riccioti after the Battle of Alto. The Battle of Bezzecca lasted until 8 p.m. Giuseppe was wounded in the knee. In the middle of the road between Tiarno and Bezzecca, the Lion of Caprera was planning a new attempt to occupy Bezzecca. They were ambushed by the Austrians. Menotti ordered a formation in a line of defense. Dogliotti positioned the artillery pieces. The Garibaldians won at the cost of many casualties, shouting, "Always forward," deciding the conflict with bayonets and a rain of grenades. Returning to the second day of the battle in Dijon, January 22, 1871, the volunteers were informed that Talent had been occupied. From Caesar to Napoleon, to Garibaldi, to those who marched to glory tomorrow, Menotti mentioned. At 9 a.m., the sun had risen and become a great flaming copper eye, and the fog had thinned. Colonel Lahoste was one who first spotted the Prussians, so he ordered everyone to prepare. Lahoste watched everything from the top of a hill. French infantry from North Africa were the first to impact the Prussian ranks during a bayonet charge. Lahoste shouted, "Come, sons of the fatherland," a reference to Roger d'Islet, a revolutionary from decades past. Lahoste was hit, and the soldiers who lifted him up noticed a look of someone who was already fleeing the world. When the Austrians got close enough, they started to throw grenades at the windows of the castle. The Prussians' charges became a cycle of fire, and gradually the castle facade began to crumble. A howitzer knocked down a dozen at the same time. 1:20 p.m. and the artillery was still incessant on both sides. Riccioti's 4th Brigade approached to reinforce the defense of the damaged castle position. Pauli became chaos, flames and smoke everywhere. The Garibaldians retreated to the main road of Pauli. From the top of the hill, Garibaldi watched Pauli with his binoculars and declared the position lost. The brigades that were with the 4th went to a factory in Dijon called Bargny. Afternoon of January 23, 1871, the brigade with Giuseppe went to the main road to Pauli to provide cover. With the imminent arrival of the Prussians, cabinets, beds, tables, everything served as barricade to lock the doors. Agricultural machinery and everything that was heavy blocked the main door of the factory. The 4th Brigade positioned 3 soldiers with machine guns, which at that time they were Gatling-type machine guns. It was around 3 p.m. Riccioti decided to go out with a company to flank the Prussians. With trumpets and drums beating, they counterattacked the famous Pomeranian regiment. "Fire on the flag!" Riccioti shouted. The regiment's flag bearer was hit and another promptly took over. They managed to make the Pomeranian regiment surrender. Urta, an 18-year-old volunteer from the Mont Blanc Hunters Company, jumped for joy in celebrating the victory. It was he who raised the flag of the 61st Pomeranian Regiment. There was a fight between the volunteers over the flag, about which group would keep the captured enemy standard. In our time, something like that doesn't make any sense, but at that time it was considered one of the greatest honors. The young Urta wanted to keep the flag. Some came to beat him, others to defend him. Captain Rostang had a rivalry with Captain Tito Strozzi. This fight lasted for a few minutes. Riccioti got involved in the fight saying, "Brave men feu." This monument was made after the Third Battle of Dijon, from January 21 to 23, 1871. The Prussians ended up winning the war, and the Vosges army was discharged, but not without making another legendary speech for those who fought with him. In his narrative, Riccioti goes back in time to July 2nd, 1849, when his father had arrived Rome with Anita Garibaldi, his mother. They wanted to return to the Eternal City, Rome, that had always been so interconnected with France, where Giuseppe was also applauded and spoke about freedom and the Italian homeland. "My soldiers are very tired. For me, Venice and then death." A shadow of sympathy spread over the faces of the passers-by, and no one said a word. This was at the time of the first Austrian invasions, 1 year after Italy had joined France in revolutions of 1848. In August 1849, Anita died, pregnant and sick with malaria. Giuseppe was not even able to accompany the burial, as he was being hunted by the Austrians. She dies in Giuseppe's arms. The second chapter of the book is about the future Garibaldian generation. More than 40 years later, during the First World War, the Garibaldi brothers enlist in the Italian Legion.